Welcome back, game developers. Today we are going to be creating an inspection system similar to what's in Resident Evil as well as many other horror games as well. This system that I created today is a very customizable and robust system that will surely help all of you in your game development process and provide a very solid template for your own first-person games. Additionally, with my channel just recently hitting 1,000 subscribers, I wanted to show my gratitude by announcing that I will officially be creating a Patreon. This is where you, my viewers and supporters, can have a place to not only support me for all the time and effort it takes to make these tutorials for you guys, but also receive tons of benefits from me as well. Exclusive tutorials, updated playlist project files, like the project you're seeing today with the realistic true first-person character project, as well as being a beta tester for Eevee, one-on-one game dev advice with me, and many other benefits are there available to all of you. As many of you know, game development is rigorous, and I try my very best to provide tutorials for you guys to not only help you learn, but simplify the process while I'm at it. So it would mean the world if you guys could check it out and potentially even support me. But I promise, no pressure. You guys just being here now means the absolute world to me. Alright, with that being said, let's get right into the tutorial. The first thing we're going to want to do is actually go to our BP folder, like right here. So we have our content, first person, then let's go to our blueprints. And I realized that from our last tutorial, we still have this animation forming level sequence. So what we'll do is we'll just go to our content, we'll create a new folder and we'll call it cinematics, and we'll just get that animation right here and bring it straight to we'll get it straight from our blueprint and bring it straight to our cinematics folder, just so that our folder organizer is a lot more organized and stuff like that, just so it looks a little bit better for us. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new folder in our blueprints, and also I'll change my scalability just so it looks a little bit better, or it runs a little bit smoother. I'm gonna right click and create a new folder in the blueprints folder. We're going to create a new folder and let's call it inspect. In here we are going to we'll leave that alone for a minute, but for one, let's go into our interact interface because we're going to be utilizing that today, and let's create a new functionality. We can create a new function and let's call it inspect as well. In this function we're going to add a couple of inputs. I think we're going to add 4 inputs, so we'll do 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll change the first input to be called character, and let's make it of BP underscore first person character. Make an object reference, and then the next one we're going to want to do inspected item, and this is going to make it so we can have a direct reference to the item that we are actually inspecting. So let's make the type static mesh, just regular static mesh, not static mesh actor. So let's go back, static mesh regular, and let's do object reference. Great, and then the next one we're going to want to do item name and also item description, and we'll make both of these right here like so. We'll make both of these just regular old text like so. So now that we have that, like you guys know, if it's in an interface like this, all you have to do is just create that, and then we'll create the functionality for it in another place. So we can close this BP or interact interface, and let's actually start working on other functionalities. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to go back to our inspect folder, and we can actually create a new blueprint class of type actor, and let's call it BP underscore inspect item. This is the item that we're going to be spawning every single time we inspect an item, and we're going to be dynamically spawning and destroying the item, so it saves us performance. So let's open up this item or this blueprint right now, and upon opening it, let's add a couple of components. So the first thing we're going to want to add is a static mesh. Let's add a static mesh, and let's just call this item, right? And let's also move this to the side so we can see more of our transform and stuff like that. Let's also add a scene capture component 2D. That's the one we're going to be looking for, not the cube. Let's add a scene capture component 2D. Let's put it right to the default scene root, and let's change some of the location. So let's actually make it so it goes back about -110, just so it's a little bit of a distance away from the actual item itself. Let's also change the field of view to be something more zoomed in, like 50 or so. You can obviously change this afterward, and we're going to go into the customization of this and everything like that. So let's compile and save. After this, let's make sure we go into our class settings and let's add our interface that we just made. So let's go to interact interface, the one that we created. If you don't have that one, just create it like I did previously, or follow the last tutorials that we made for interaction. After this, let's go into our event graph, and we can delete these nodes, start off fresh, so we can compile and save. And let's, for one, go to the right and let's implement this event. So we can right click on this inspect event and let's implement it. And now we have the event that we want to fire off every single time we start up this blueprint. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to right click on this character and promote it to a variable. Firstly, that'll make it so we can get this all the data from our actual character actor, and we can start utilizing that to manipulate how we interact with the item. After this, we're going to want to make sure we actually set this static mesh. So let's actually go off of our item. We can set the static mesh, and the new mesh will be the inspected item. This is going to make it so we can dynamically set our item based on whatever item we're actually currently inspecting. We don't want it to show a different item than we're actually inspecting. After this, we're going to actually create a widget, and this widget is going to be where we actually see our item. So we can create widget, but for now we're not going to have the widget to create, so we can't actually like create it and set it as a variable and stuff like that. But what we can do is skip that step, so we can just reroute for a second, and off this reroute just add to viewport. Well, actually, I don't know if we can add to viewport. We can technically, but there's no actual return value yet since there's no actual class. So it'll give us an error right now if you try to compile, but just keep it like this for a second. After this, we're going to want to disable input, and it's going to ask for our player controller. So all we have to do is just go off of this and get player controller. And then we're going to then want to enable input. So let's enable input. Same thing as before, go off our player controller. And now if you try to compile, like I said previously, it doesn't have currently a widget. We're going to create that next, so it's going to say there's an error, but that's okay. Let's just keep it like this for now, and let's actually create that widget. However, before we actually create that widget, let's actually do a couple of things. First, let's go to our blueprints and then into our inspect folder. Let's right click, and then instead of actually searching, there's actually a way that people don't really know about. You can always just type in what you're actually looking for. So for example, we're going to look for a render target. We can just type in render, and you'll see right here, it'll automatically pop up looking for something. We want the regular render target, so we can just get that and just call it RT_inspect for render target inspect. We can save that and go inside of it. We want to change a couple things, mainly just the size X and Y. So we can just change it from 256 by 256 to 1024 by 1024. We can close this, and then we can go right back to our first person map, and let's do another thing with this. We want to then create a material off of it. So what we can do is we can create material. If you right click on it, you can call it M_inspect camera. And this is because our camera will be yielding this material. So let's open this up. It'll bring in our texture sample straight off the bat, which is good for us, but we're going to have to change up a couple of different things. So let's click on the material, and let's change some of the settings of the material. So we don't want it to be surface. We actually want it to be user interface, and we want to change the blend mode from opaque to be translucent. After this, we're going to want to go straight from the RGB to the final color, and off of the alpha value, which controls the opacity of the image, we're going to want to get a 1- node, which basically makes it so well, that's going to go straight into the opacity. How I can really explain it, you can search more about this if you would like, but the 1- node basically makes it so everything, just imagine it's inversed. So the image that you're looking at that we're going to be showing in this render target is going to be the one that is that has the opacity of 1, meaning it's showing, and everything around it is going to be 0, which is what we want. We want everything else around it to be seeing the surroundings, while the image is the one that's going to be opaque for us and we can see it. So that's exactly what we want. We want it to be like so. So let's just press Q and let's just apply that. After that, we can close that and create our widget. Post-edit code things here. During this part of the tutorial, I completely forgot one of the things that we need to do. So I'll just save you the headache and I'll show you what you have to do right now. Basically, make sure you go to the BP_inspect item, scroll down on the right until you see the scene capture, and make sure you put in for the texture target the RT_inspect, the one we just made together. Make sure you put that one as the actual texture target to save yourself some hassle. And yeah, let's just continue with the tutorial. So let's right click, go to user interface, go to widget blueprint, and let's create a widget, and let's call it just W_inspect. That's good enough for us. Let's open this up. Go to the top left for the canvas palette, and let's just type in canvas panel, drag that onto our W_inspect, and let's actually make it so it supports 4K monitors. So let's just hold shift and go off this little arrow on the right, and we can make it so it goes all the way to 3840 by 2160. That'll make it so it actually is compatible with 4K monitors. After this, we're going to want to get an image. So let's just look for an image, drag that right onto the canvas panel, and let's change the root. So let's go to anchors and let's change it to the middle of the screen. We can reset all these transforms, and let's change the size X and the size Y to match with our render target. So you probably guessed it, we're going to make it 1024 by 1024. You can see that this is not aligned correctly to the middle of the screen. So what we can do is we can use the alignment that Unreal Engine provides for us. So we just want to change this to 0.5, which will make it go horizontally 0.5 over and upwards 0.5 over with this one. So now we have it horizontally centered at the middle of the screen. We're going to want to change this image to the one we just created, this material we just created, so we can actually just go straight to M_inspect camera and go back to our widget and just press this right here, and that'll make it translucent. This is what you're supposed to see right now. Don't worry. This is what it's supposed to look like. So yeah, this is good for us. We're just going to keep this, compile and save, and then we're going to add our border, and this border is basically going to be a container essentially, so we can just put it right to our canvas panel. Basically same thing, just anchor, make it the full screen this time because we want it to be our blur behind the actual camera. So let's set our offset right to be 0, and let's set our offset bottom to be 0 so it covers the entire screen. And then after this, let's change the brush and then tint to be 0 so that there's nothing there. And then on top of this, we're going to want to get a background blur and parent that, or make that a child of the border, which will be the parent. And so that'll have the same dimensions as the border, which is good for us. And let's just change the blur strength to be 5, for example, and you can know it works if you see this type of effect in the background. Great, so now that we have that, let's go and get a couple of text elements. So we can just drag a couple of text elements. Let's just bring them right in. We can make it go like so. Let's just call one of them oh, actually, let's just change a couple of things first. So let's actually change our border to be at like -5, just so our text is always on top. So we can have our text like so. Let's parent this text to the upper left-hand corner. And let's just make it so, let me actually reference my other values just so we have a good value. So let's make it about 50 on the positive X. Of course, you can just follow this if you want to have what I have for now, but you can always customize this as well. This is just all personal preference. Let's make the positive Y about 100, and let's change the sizing to about 170, and then the size Y to be 40. Of course, this is going to get overridden in terms of size X if you have more text here than fits inside this box. So let's then change the text content to be a variable that we're going to be creating. Don't click on this create binding. Instead, we can go to our graph and we can go to variables right here, and let's just create a new text variable, and let's just call this one item name. As simple as that. And let's duplicate that, and let's create another one that's going to be item description. And that's all we need for now. We can just compile and save. And of course, as I said before, you can customize this to make this more if you would like to. So let's just call this item name text box. And let's right here just bind it to the item name that we're going to be having there. So basically this text block right here, what that says is going to be overridden automatically when we actually call the inspect right here. We're just going to put it straight in and it'll do its job. So let's go straight here and let's finish this so we have it all set up. We're going to duplicate this text and we're going to be changing its value again just so we have it all looking correctly. So let's just make the positive X the same alignment on the X direction, but a different on the Y direction. Let's make it a little bit farther down. And then let's change this content binding to be the item description. This is also a personal preference, but I'm just going to change the font family to be Roboto Tiny, so it looks a little bit more sleek. You can do it something like that, or if you want to, you can make this one bold, or however you would like to do it in your video game. It's all perfectly fine. And then we're going to make one more text. Let's just duplicate this one more time, and let's just make this one go in the bottom right. And all this is basically going to do is just show the character how they can leave. So since our interact button that we set up previously is E, we're just going to make it the same thing. So let's just do press E to exit, and you'll see right there it'll show press E to exit in the bottom right. So great, this is all we need for now. So what we can do is we can compile and save, and then we can close this widget. Let's go back to our BP_inspect item, and let's just change this to be our W_inspect. And once you do that, compile and save, and then you can right click and refresh node and make this instead just go from this return value, and instead just go straight off of this, and you want to right click and promote to variable. And we'll just call this inspect widget reference, and this will just make it so we can always reference this inspect widget and call different values from it and so on. But I did forget, there's one more thing we want to do in this inspect widget. Let's go back to it really quickly. Let's open it up, and those variables that we created earlier, we're going to want to actually make them variables that we can actually change. So let's make them instance editable, or we can just click this little icon right here, this eye icon, which makes it public. After we do that, we're going to want to actually expose on spawn for both of these. And what that does is, if you don't know, it basically just makes it so right here, if we right click on this and refresh, we have actual access to those variables, so we can just easily put them from our item name to item name and item description to item description. This just makes it so we can immediately change these values, and it's a lot more customizable for us and much more efficient in terms of code. We don't really have to cast a whole bunch. This is indirect casting through an interface. So great, now that we have this, we can focus on a bunch of other things for our inspect. The next thing we can do is actually go underneath and call our IA_interact, which is how we're actually going to be able to interact with this. So let's just call that, and we can just handle all the interaction that happens right here. That's why we enabled the input previously. We disabled and then enabled. What that does is it makes it so most frequently we enable this input, and now we can actually deal with this IA_interact input action. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to do the same thing again. Let's just disable and enable again, just so it references and understands that we are controlling this actor. We can do that right off as started. And then after that, we're going to then go into an is valid, because we want to see if our widget is valid. So we'll do an is valid, and we want to get the one with the question mark all the way at the bottom. We're going to see if our input object is our inspect widget reference. If this is valid, that means that it is actually spawned, which means that it is set, because sometimes if you close it, you don't want it to be any problems. So you just want to make sure it's only when it is valid. And what you'll do is you'll remove from parent, because what this means is, and let's actually just go off of here for a second. What this means is, it means that when you're trying to interact with it again, that means you're trying to close it. That's like when I showed you right here, when you're pressing this E key again, it basically just means that you want to close this now. So we're going to take that input action, our interact input action, and we're going to remove it from parent, because that's what they're trying to do. And then what we can do is we can just go off of this value. We can hold Alt, drag it in, and just set that to be none, nothing in here. And then we can just simply destroy the actor. Great, so now we have it set up the way that we want it. Now we can go and actually do more robust things with this to make it all tie in together. So we'll come back to this BP_inspect item, but for now, let's focus on the main thing that we're going to be dealing with a lot, which is our actual BP_item. And also, let's rename it from BP_item, which was more of an example in the previous tutorials, to BP_base item, because we're going to want to make children of this item to then make our actual actors in the scene. So what we'll do is we'll go into this item, and we're going to change a couple of things. So the first thing we're going to want to change is making our static mesh right here to actually have none. We're going to clear that so it has no static mesh. And then we're also going to make sure that we create a bunch of new variables that we're going to be able to utilize. Let's go to our event graph and we're going to change some of this. So also let's actually just change this while we're here. We're going to get rid of this, get rid of this. This is all to show something previously without using an interact interface, excuse me. But now we're going to use one of those, so we can just get rid of that. And this before, like I said, is just to have a begin overlap and an end overlap to show our icon. So we can keep that because that is going to be useful for us. Unless you don't want that. Of course, if you do want that, we made that in a previous tutorial. Or again, if you want to get all these project files at once and have them updated automatically when I make tutorials, you can just always subscribe to my Patreon and I will be updating them for all of you there. Great, so now we are going to work on the new things that we need. So let's go to our variables in the bottom left and let's make them organized. So we're all going to go underneath this public category and let's create a new variable and let's call it, we're going to want, first off, it to be item mesh. So we're going to want an item mesh variable. So let's just go off of this, change it from Boolean to be static mesh. And just like previously, we're going to want to make sure we click on this regular static mesh and do an object reference. For this category, let's change it from default to be public. Then let's change it from public to then be public mesh. So we have a certain public that we're going to want to change and make it a public mesh. Now, after this, let's just compile just so we have that. And then we're also going to want to add a bunch more. So let's just go underneath this, add a new variable, and we'll just drag it underneath mesh. And we'll just change this from being a static mesh to being a text. And this is going to be the item name. And then let's create a new one. Also, all of these are going to be instance editable. So you'll want to make them all public. Also, let's drag this underneath public, but then change it to be public and then reference. So this is not going to actually be seen, so we just want that to be just like that, just so no one even sees it. We're not going to make that public, by the way. This is just going to be just like how it is now. And then we'll have item mesh, item name, and then we're going to want item description as well. So we can duplicate this item name, call this item description, and all of these are going to be actually editable for us when we actually create items. Another thing that we're going to want to create is item scale. So for example, if you get an item from Sketchfab or another 3D marketplace where you can get items like FBX files and use them, we want to make sure that we can actually utilize them in our game with correct scaling. And so what actually tends to happen is people will drag them into the world, and then if they don't see them, they'll change this scaling. You don't actually want to do that, because what that'll do is it'll change all these icon scaling as well. It'll change the sphere collision. So for example, if I do this and if I set this bigger, you see how the sphere collision gets bigger? It just messes everything up. So we don't want to do that. We want to set the sphere collision to be just by itself, but individually change the let me go navigate back. Individually change the item scaling. So let's just do that. Let's change it all to 1 by default. Make it so it's all just 1 by default. We can again make sure that all of them are public, but let's also make sure that the item scaling is a vector, because it's a set of 3 different float values. So that's a vector. The next thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to go off of this public, off of this mesh, and let's go to another public. And so let's just minimize this mesh for now. And let's also drag this up a little bit so we can see. We're going to want to create a new variable, and let's just make sure this one is a Boolean. And basically this is going to make sure this is going to navigate if we want to inspect or not. So we're just going to call it inspect, and let's make it go under public. And you can see there's multiple of them here. The reason for this is one of them is under public mesh with no space, and the other one is with public mesh with a space. So let's just make sure, let's see which one is which. So let's just see really quickly. I see this one has a space, the other ones don't. So what we can do is we can make it so they all have this no space. So now there's no confusion. But what we'll do is we'll just make them all have that space just by doing that. So we can just make them all have that space just for sanity reasons. So just change them all to have that space right after that vertical bar. Great, so now there should be no, great, yeah, you can see that now. So now we're gonna do the same thing. So we're just gonna call this public, and then we're gonna make this called interaction. And then under interaction, we're gonna make another subcategory called inspection. So what this is going to have, it's going to have this inspect variable, make it so it's public so we can change it if we want to. After that, we're going to add another variable, and that variable is going to be the rotation that we want to give the inspected item. So a default rotation that we want for it. So we can do item inspection rotation, and let's change that from being Boolean to being a rotator. Just like so, we can make this public and put it right underneath inspection as well. Let's create another variable and let's make it so it's item inspection scale. So just like before, inspection scale, this is going to make it so instead of the world item, by the way, this is the world item, so how it looks in the world, how big you want it in the world, you can make this one for how big you want it actually in the inspection viewport. So let's change this to vector as well, make it so it's public, of course. And now that's all the ones we need for interaction inspection. Now we're going to do interaction settings, so we can minimize that. Let's make a new variable and let's just make this one another vector. We're going to call it item location, icon location, excuse me. And basically what this is going to do is the icon that we created previously, again, if you want to follow that tutorial or subscribe to the Patreon, you can find that there. This one you can dynamically change that if you don't already have it. So let's just set the default value to be like 45 on the Y value, or on the Z value since it's the 3D axis. And what that'll do is it'll make it go right above the actual mesh, and it also gives us a way to dynamically change it for whatever we want to make it. But that's just the default value. You can always change that and see how you see fit. After that, we're going to grab these two variables that we actually already created. So what we can do is we can drag them under interact. And now we want to make it so it's not just interact, but it's actually, yeah, you see how it does that sometimes. So it's going to have multiple different things. What we can do is we can make it so we'll go to clean this up a little bit. So let's go to interact inspection and then grab this one. So this one we can just copy and paste that, go to here and make sure we paste it, and it'll have the same one, and then paste it again and it'll have the same one. And then now there should be only one of them. Yep. And then so this interaction one is actually just from here. So when you drag it, it seems like it doesn't give it any space, which is the problem. So what we can do then is we can just go straight to this one and just change this to be, we can paste it again, but change it from being inspection to instead just being settings. So now it'll have the settings category. And again, you're going to want to have the item location in here as well. So we can just grab this and go to settings. So it'll be in the same category. Let's make it go above a little bit just so you can see that first. They're both going to be public, and then let's drag it in here. Make sure it has the same one though. So we'll just paste and make it so it's settings. Let's make sure. Yep, it looks all good. And that's not the last one. There's one more that is actually the last one. We're gonna make it Boolean. And I know there's a lot of these variables, but they all make it so it's very customizable for you guys. So let's just make it debugging, and we'll ask that question for everybody. And we're just gonna make that into settings as well. So now we have all of our variables. We can compile and save and start getting to work on how we actually want to utilize them. So let's go to our construction script. Let's move these things that we had previously up here, and let's actually create a sequence. You can hold S and left click, and you can create a sequence node. Let's go off of the then 0 and actually just connect these right here. And then off of that, by the way, we can just comment this and just say like setting sphere radius for collision, right? Because that's what this is doing. After that, we're going to want to set the actual relative location for the icon that we created down here. So all you want to do is go to your construction script and then go to the setting the relative location like I said previously. So let's go off of our, let's find it, our close interact icon. So it is this inner interact icon, and let's just set the relative, let me see what I'm actually typing, set relative transform. So, or actually we could just do location since that's all that we're changing, relative location. And we can connect it like so, and we want to make sure it's not just the inner because we want the outer to be at the same spot, so we can drag that in as well. We can keep them both like this, bring them both to the target, and let's make the new location, the one that we created right where is it? It's in one of these, the icon location. Oh my god, I'm so sorry. In the settings, so we want it to be the icon location. So now we can make them all straight like so. Let's just make it so one of them you can actually see. Bring them in a little bit closer. So now that we have this, we can comment it and we can just say setting location of icons on item. Great, so now that we have that, we're basically done this first then 0, but we need to start doing the then 1. So for the then 1, we're gonna go off and we're gonna set the static mesh. You can just keep it like this for now. We're gonna make the target the static mesh that you see here, but the new mesh is gonna be the item mesh that we have like so. So let's drag that in, get mesh, and make it the item mesh right here. We can just press Q to make them all lined up. Also, to make this a little bit more easy to see, I'm gonna put the mesh all the way at the top. Is that possible? I guess not. If I compile and save and then go in, if I drag this in, yeah, I guess not, but that's okay. We just need it to be, if you want to make it like that, you can remake the variables and just make it like that. But basically you just want it so, let me see. Maybe we can move it out and then move it back in. Yeah, no, I mean, you can always change where you want it, but if you do want it to be all the way at the top, that would just mean that you'd have to create this folder first and then not actually change some of the names. So it's very simple. You just want to make sure you have this one as the very first option. After this, we can just go right off of this and just set the world transform. Don't worry about what the actual target is for now, so we can just do whatever one, but I'll just click this one. The target that we do want it to be, though, is the static mesh inside of this blueprint. So let's just go off this static mesh, drag it in, and just make that the target. After this, we're going to split this new transform, so we can just split struct pin, and we'll get the world location. So let's just grab the world location like so, drag that straight in, and then we'll get the world rotation as well, because we don't want to actually change those. We want those to be the exact same, because this is what's going to be spawning in the actual level. But this one, the new transform scale, we want that to change. So let's get the item scale, bring that straight in like so. So that's how we want that to look. And essentially what this is doing is just setting mesh dynamically and then setting scale of mesh dynamically, right? So this just makes it so we have more control of exactly how we want our item to look. After this, we're going to want to actually see if we're actually in debugging mode, because if we're in debugging mode, it kind of matters to us because we want to show and not show certain things. So let's press B for the branch, and off of this, we're going to want to see if we are in debugging mode like here. So we can just drag that in, go right off the condition, and if we are, what that means is we want to get our close and our outer sphere, and we want to set the visibility to be true, because what really this is used for, the debugging mode, is if we want to see how close we are to an item, so we can dynamically change the collision space, how far we are or how close we are to be able to interact with this item. So what we'll do is we'll set the visibility here as well, just like so. Drag that in and set them both to true, and then what's good is we can copy and then paste here as well, and just make these both false for if we're not in debugging mode, just like so. Great, now that we have this, let's actually go into our event graph and start working on the magic that we're going to need. So let's close up this public so we know exactly what we're doing. Let's go off of our interact and let's just implement that event so that we can see if we're interacting with the character, and if we are, we want to see if we want to inspect that character, because obviously we have the variable that'll tell us if we want to inspect or not right here in inspection. So if we toggle yes true, then we want to make it so we are inspecting that character, or that object, I'm sorry. So we'll go off of this true and we'll spawn the actor. So let's spawn actor from class, and the class is going to be bp underscore inspect item. That is the item that we want to spawn. And for our transform, what we can do is we can just use a handy little function called make transform. Not make relative, just make transform like so. And let's just drag it out a little bit so we have more space. We don't want to change any of the rotations or scaling because we do that dynamically, but the location we can just make it 1 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 like that. So make it a bunch of zeros, because basically this is just going to make it so it spawns in a location that is in front of the camera. There we go, just like so. And then we can go right off of this, and we're going to utilize some of the functions that we're going to create inside of this BP inspect item. But for now, what we can do is we can call the inspect. So let's just look in inspect, and we want to look for the one that has the message on it. And if you can't find it, you can go to context sensitivity and you can look for here it is right here, the inspect. And so all we want to do is go off of target and bring it straight to this actor, because this is the target for it. Bring the character straight to this character right here, so we can use a reroute node and bring it around like so, which is good. And then for the inspected item, we just want to get this static mesh, and we can turn on context sensitivity now, and we're just going to get the static mesh. Just get static mesh, and let's look for it. Oh, now it's showing up. Okay, so you just want to go off of this, I guess. For some reason it wasn't before, but get static mesh is now showing up, which is actually what you want. You'll know you have the right one if you have this right here. We want to plug that right in and make it so it appears straight. So let's just drag all of them and just make it go up a little bit. Cool. And then for item name, we're just going to want to go straight off and get the item name that we have in our public down here. We'll grab that, and then also the same with the item description, just so that we can dynamically change those and it'll show up on our widget exactly like how we want. So great, now that we have this, let's go back to our BP_inspect item and create some custom events so we can change our rotation, scaling, and everything like that to make it truly customizable. So let's make a custom event. Let's go underneath and just type in custom event, and we're going to use this to set the inspect rotation. So set inspect rotation, we'll grab as an input our item rotation. So let's just get item rotation. So we're not actually going to look for that. We're going to look for rotator. It'll be called a rotator. Right here is what you're looking for. We're going to call it item rotation, and we're going to go off of this and actually promote this value to a variable. We're going to want to still get our item right here. Go off of this and just get world transform is a good way to do it. And we can just split this and get everything else we're still going to need. So we can just set the world transform and split this as well, and then drag the location and the scaling, but change this new rotation to be like so. All right, so now that we have this, we're going to want to create another custom event. Let's go to custom event. We're going to add another custom event, and we're just going to call this one set inspect scale. So now this is basically going to do the exact same thing, but we're just going to inspect or get the inspect scale. So let's just do another input, and let's change this to be a vector, because that's how scales are handled. And let's just call it inspection scale. What we'll do here is get the item, we'll drag that in, and we'll get the world transform just as we did previously, just like so, and we'll drag that like here, and let's split that just like we did before. Go off of this and set the world transform, put that right into the connector pin, and split this as well, and we'll get the location and we'll get the rotation, but the new scale is going to be just like so. Put it right into the scale, and now we'll be able to dynamically make it so it changes. And we're actually going to want to handle some of the functionalities that we're going to need. So we can right click, or let's left click and go over this. Let's just set inspection rotation dynamically, and we can show when bubble size or whatever, just to make it so we can see the comment a little bit better when we zoom out. Do the same thing here, set inspection scale dynamically, and show when bubble size, just so we see it like that. Now let's handle some of the controls. So let's get a left mouse button click, and we're going to essentially just handle one thing with this. We're going to want to see if we want to rotate or not. So if we do, we're going to want to handle that. So let's create a new variable, and let's just call it rotate, and rotate question mark. And so we'll go off of this, and we'll just set it to be true if we press, and set it to be false if we do not press, or when we release, excuse me. Now we'll get our right mouse button, and what this will do is basically the right mouse button is going to make it so we can set our transform and everything back to our initial pose. So you can change this obviously from the right mouse button to be something else, but the right mouse button is just essentially supposed to make it so it's exactly what it was at the default transform location, and so it's exactly what it was previously. But we're going to keep it as the right mouse button for now. So let's go off of this right mouse button, let's go off of press and set world rotation, and we're going to set it of the item, and we're going to get that world rotation and we're going to set it to this new rotation right here. So we can just get this value that we have it right here. We called it, instead of just item rotation, let's call that initial rotation, because that's the initial rotation that we want to have. So we can just grab this, move it in right here, boom, just like so. And basically what that's going to do is it's just going to make it so it's always set to the initial rotation when we want to actually right click. And so now we can go off of this, and we can also grab our scene capture component 2D and just set the field of view to be the initial one that it is, which for right now is 50 in my case. And that'll just make it so it goes right back to the default pose. Great, so all we really have left to do is just to make it so we can move around, zoom in into the actual item that we want to inspect, and also make it so we can move with WASD, which will make it a lot easier for us. So what we'll do is we'll just make it so we can move in horizontally. So in order to do that, we're going to get the horizontal movement. So let's grab the mouse X. Not debug, mouse X, let's just look for mouse X, and let's just grab this one right here, the mouse X event. Off of this, we're basically just going to see if we can rotate. So let's just grab that variable that we got earlier, put that right into the condition, and if we can rotate, what that means is we want to change the rotation of the current item. So the way that we can do that, we're going to go off of this axis value, and that's basically how fast we're moving our mouse. Let's multiply, and let's put a -3 on it, and basically what that means is that's the speed at which we are rotating the item. So this -3, basically we're going to put it right into a combine, and you'll see it right here. If you combine rotators right here, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to split this struct right here and go off of this Z value, this yaw value. That's how you move it horizontally. Now for A, we're going to want to make sure that we get the item. So let's go off of our item and then just get the world rotation. We're going to keep that world rotation and just plug that straight in here, just so we have these two rotations. And basically what this does is it'll combine the rotations and give us a new rotation, basically just moving our item by how much our axis value is moving. So now let's use this value and actually set the world rotation, and the target will be, like you can probably assume, just the item. So let's plug that in right to the target and right here to the true. So you can move this down a little bit if you would like, make that Q if you would like, just to make it more straight and everything like that. And now we have moving the mouse horizontally. So we can comment set mouse movement horizontally. Right, so now we have that all figured out. And what this also is this is resetting transform of inspected item. So right after that, we're just going to grab this, and basically this is going to be only allows us to rotate when left clicking mouse, like so. So now we have all of these all commented, so we can see exactly what they're doing. And now we're going to want to do the same thing with the horizontal for the vertical. So doing that, you could probably assume we're going to want to use the mouse Y. So let's grab off this mouse Y. We can do this so we can see everything right here. Let's go off the mouse event. So now we have the mouse Y right here. We're going to want to grab this same exact multiplier, or any multiplier you want, but I recommend doing the same one because you want to be able to move vertically and horizontally probably at the same exact speed. We're going to copy basically every single thing here. So what we can do is, instead of doing just this, let's copy all of this like so, and then just paste, and then we'll just put that right into the axis value. But instead of doing the yaw, it's really going to be the pitch now that's going to be changing. And so we'll just keep it like so, and we can just make this so it's a little bit straighter just by grabbing these two and queuing that out. And we can just see on this again and set mouse movement vertically and set the bubble show. So now you have it just like so. So now we have the horizontal and vertical. Now we also want to move with W, A, S, and D. Now I have a certain way that I decided to do this, so I'm going to show you the way that I had this, because a lot of these games have it so you can also move with WASD as well as your mouse. So the way that I did it was, off of triggered, we're basically going to make a branch. So let's get a branch, and let's make it so the condition is based on our X and our Y input action value. And since I don't see them right here, what we can do is we can go to our first person character, and go and navigate to our IA underscore move right here. Let's just copy this and go right back into our inspected item. We can delete that and paste this one right here. Let's go off of triggered. Let's do it like so and get our X value. And we want to see if it's not equal to 0 and get our Y value and see if it's not equal. And what we'll do is we'll grab both of these and just see OR. And we'll grab that OR right here and basically plug that straight into the condition. This is basically just to see if we are moving or not, or are pressing WASD or not. And if we are, then we want to actually handle what we actually do. What we can do is we can create a sequence right afterward. Let's hold S and create a sequence on that true. And we want to handle basically our world rotation the same way we did previously. So what we can do is we can copy this and the recombine. Let's get off of this. We can just copy this right here and do it like so and make it so we have based on whichever way we're moving. So if we're going off of the X direction, we want to grab this and multiply it by whatever value you want to move by, the speed this is. So let's just make it -2, I guess. And you can always change this afterward to change it to your liking. But we can just move this straight to the yaw because again, we're moving sideways, and then we'll just reroute node this up and move it over. And then we'll do the same exact thing we did previously. So we'll set the world rotation of the item. Great, so now we have that all set up. Let's just move this like so and get this and move that up as well. So now we want to basically do the exact same thing. So we can just copy all of this, paste it all as well, and make this instead go to the Y-axis. So we'll just move that down, move that over, and we'll paste that right in here. Remember to change the yaw to now pitch because of the fact that we are handling the Y-axis. We don't want to actually have it moving like this. We want to have it moving like this now. If we're doing the X versus the Y direction in the movement, WASD. Great, so now we have everything set up here, I believe. So now we want to basically comment and just make sure we have this all organized. And let's just say move with WASD, and we'll just do show bubble when not zoomed in. Just like so. We'll make it so it has a little bit of room as well. Cool, so now the last thing that we want to do actually is zoom in and out. So to zoom in and out, we're just going to basically use the mouse wheel up and the mouse wheel down. So let's just grab both of those, mouse wheel down. So now we have the mouse wheel up and the mouse wheel down. All we really want to do is get our scene capture component, go off of this and get the field of view. So we can just set the field of view, and let's grab this. Oops, we're gonna grab this, and we want to right here get the field of view, and we basically want to increment this value. So increment or decrement based on if we're zooming in or zooming out. So since we're zooming in here, we just want to decrement this value. So let's just minus it by 1, and then we're just gonna clamp this float. So clamp float, which basically means it can only go between these minimum and maximum number. We're just gonna make it be 30 and 80. And essentially what this does is it makes it so it can't go less than 30 as the minimum value, and it can't go more than 80. So we'll just make this straight like so and move them in a little bit closer. And all this basically does is, again, like I said previously, it makes it so it will decrement. It'll make it so it goes down -1 every single time, but it will not be able to go lower than 30. So this is the zoom in effect. And then conversely, we're gonna have to do the zoom out effect, which is basically the exact same thing. So we can kind of just copy this and then just get rid of the event and paste it. And we're just gonna wanna change the -1 to be +1. So we get this plus and add 1 to the value and just make it be like so. So then we can just comment on this and zoom out. Great, so now that we have this, we have multiple functionalities to our inspection system to make it very closely similar to Resident Evil system. And you can see you have all these different things here now. So now we want to make sure that we have everything set up exactly the way we want. So let's go back to our base item. And we weren't done here, if you guys remember. So what we actually have to do is we have to go after right here. Let's make it so we actually set all the values that we created. So we're almost done. We're basically right there. All we want to do is now set the inspect rotation, this custom event that we have. We want to set the inspect rotation, and we want to get the item inspection rotation that we set, so it automatically sets itself. And then the same thing with the set inspect scale. You want to do that as well, and then just get the item inspection scale, which is perfect, just like so. So now we have all of that set up, and basically what this means is if this false is like false right here off this inspect, it just means basically that we do not want to actually have anything like that actually happen. We just want to pick up the item maybe, or do whatever we want with the item at that point, but we don't want to actually do any of this. Let's see where this error comes from. Right here, oh, it's the target itself. We're gonna need to connect the target to this return value, just like that. So we can just compile and save, because again, those customer events are only in the BP_inspect. They're all in here, so that's where we handle all of that. So now that we have all of that set up, I'm pretty sure that's all. We're gonna test it out in a moment, but let's make sure for certain. Let's see. So if we go to our BP_base item, for one, we wanna make sure that this is working the way it should be. Let's go to our set dynamic item. There shouldn't be any mesh. Yeah, there's no mesh, which is good. So what we could do is we can get rid of all of these BP_base item, BP_base item, BP_item, all these items that you have, whatever you may have. And we don't need to drag this in at all. What we want to do is we want to create a child of this. So we can create a child class. Let's call it BP_, whatever you want. Let's get BP_phone. And what we can do is we can drag that into the level now, and we'll set the mesh, we can set the name, we can do whatever we would like. So let's just call this phone. Let's say I love this phone, exclamation point. We could set the scaling of the mesh to whatever we would like. And let's go into the interaction settings. So if we do debugging, you'll see it like that. So what we can do is we can go to our BP_base item, and let's go to our right here. If we click on this, we want to set the visibility so it's all not visible. So the way that we actually would like to do that is gonna make sure, yeah, they're both just set like this. And if we click on not debugging, it should disappear. I think I see the problem. So the problem is we want to make sure that it's not the icon itself, but actually the inner sphere collision. So the inner sphere collision and the outer sphere collision is what we're going to do in the construction script of the BP_base item. Similarly, we can do this right here and just connect them to the targets. So now, yes, now you can see if you turn on debugging, you'll see the ring around it, or the collision. This is where you're actually going to be in the collision. So this is useful because now if you want to make it so the inner sphere collision is very small, or whatever you would like to do, or you can reset it to the default value, or the outer sphere collision. Basically, if you want to see the item walking right here, you can see the little icon or whatever, you can have access to change any of that. And like so we can close some of these, we can make it so some of these do not appear. And so I'll grab a mesh very quickly for the BP_phone. Yep, that looks fine for the sake of this tutorial. So what we'll do is we can just save all. So now let's actually use this. So let's just call it SM_phone. And let's actually use this now in our children object right here for our phone. So what we can do is we can go to item mesh, and we can just use the phone just like so. And you can see it comes straight in. Now, if we want to, we can change it to be bigger like this. And you can see now the phone is pretty big. Maybe even too big. We'll just change it to like maybe 1.5 on all axes. So we can do it like so. And now we can also change is we can make it so we obviously want to inspect this item. But what I'll show you is if we go up to it right now, and if we interact with the item, what'll happen is if we click on it, it'll just say pick up item. But that's because of the fact that we did not click on inspect. So now let's inspect that item, and you'll see a whole different result. So what will happen is if I go in and if I go to that actual phone, and if I click on it, also this height right here you can automatically adjust. I'll show you that in a second. If I click on it, you'll see that it actually shows up. But there's a couple things we actually have to change. We don't want to be able to move, and we don't want to be for whatever reason it's not actually showing up. So let's actually fix that right now. So the reason why is actually because we are supposed to connect our character reference right here. The variable we set right here, we want to set that to disable. So we disable the input for that, and then enable it for the one we currently are on, this actor. And then we want to do the same thing for right here. When we enable, we want it to be the character just like so. So now what will happen is once we go in, we want it to be so that when we walk in there and as soon as we actually interact with this object, we cannot move everything. We're just stuck in this widget, which is exactly what we want. But then we press E again, we can move freely. Now let's actually figure out why we cannot see the object spawn in. Hey guys, post edit code things here once again, just the last time. If you are having problems with seeing your item when you're trying to inspect, there are a couple things that it could be. For one, make sure that your item scale right here is set at 111 by default value. In your BP underscore base item, you're probably gonna have to change this value per blueprint, per child blueprint, I mean, but just make sure it's at 111 and not 000 by default. Another thing you're gonna wanna change, I said it earlier, but I'm not sure, some of you may have missed it. You're gonna wanna actually make sure you go to your scene capture component 2D, scroll down, and make sure your scene capture is RT underscore inspect. Additionally, make sure that your actual if you go to this RT underscore inspect, make sure it's 1024 by 1024, and make sure that for right here in your W underscore inspect, your widget, you are using the material M underscore inspect camera for your actual material. And also, if another thing, if you are having issues where you're not actually seeing it, make sure the scale of the object when you're inspecting it is big enough. By default, it's 111, but you might have to scale it up. If it's super small, you might not be able to see it at all. Oh, and one last thing, make sure in your BP underscore base item, I believe, when you have this make transform, make sure this is at 100 million. So you'll have right there, right here, you can see that it's at 100 million. That's the location that I use for my X value. So that also could be something for your make transform if you have a problem with that. But again, just making sure that all of your variables are set to the correct, all of your functions and all of the custom events we made and interact interface functions we made are all made and corresponding to the correct variables. That is very important. But yeah, like I said earlier, if you have any questions, make sure you leave them in the comments below. So let's go to our phone. Let's change the inspection sizing. So let's just change it to 111, or like maybe like 10, 10, 10. And now what we can do is we can see how actually big it is in the scene. Let's also change the rotation to something that I know will look a little bit better for the inspection rotation. So let's just change it to like 25 and then 50. So now what you'll see is once we go over here, let's just play from here. Once we go in here and we press E, well, that's still too big. Let's change this. So this is why it's good to have this inspection, so you can change it depending on how big the actual mesh is. So we'll go into here, play from here, and let's see how big it is. Good. Now you can see, so you can make it bigger if you would like to, but you can see, so like now if I want to make it bigger, we can make it 5, 5, 5, right? And so now if we go into the level, play from here, press E, you can see it's too big now. So again, you can always just tinker with these settings. That's what's so good about this. Let's make it 3, 3, 3, and let's go right in, and now this should be a good size. Let's go into full screen. Let's click on it, and you can see now it's a little big, but you can always zoom out and always change how you would like it. And of course you can go 360, so that's by holding down the left mouse button. You can also press WASD, which I'm doing now, and you can see that it moves also. And yeah, so it's very customizable. You can see that on the top left, the phone and I love this phone was all set from this actual blueprint right here. We set it right here, and of course I could change this to whatever I'd like. I could change it, oh excuse me, that was my phone. We could change it to whatever we would like right here, right? And then if we go in and play from here, you can see it changes in the top left to be whatever you'd like. So it's very customizable in that regard, and it basically makes it so it's like freely customizable for you to make it whatever you would like. Additionally, of course you can change the actual rotation. So if you go like this and the player wants to go back to the beginning, they can right click and it brings them right back to their initial pose and FOV. Also, if you want to make it so you can trigger when pause, all you'd have to do is just do like set game pause right here, like so, and then set game pause right here, make it false and make it true right here, obviously, and then go to your IA underscore interact and just, I'll show you really quickly. We want to go to, where did we store it? We're gonna go to input, our IMC underscore default, go to our interact, so we can go right here, and then go right here, and you want to basically make it so you can trigger when paused. Let me find that very quickly. Oh, right up here. So you just click this and it'll trigger when paused. So obviously then when it's paused, you can still get your input. And yeah, that's all you would do for triggering when paused. Yeah, I appreciate all of you guys watching this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I know this was a little bit of a longer tutorial, but again, thank you for sticking with me. And if you would like to get all of these files plus all of the older tutorials and future tutorials automatically updated and downloadable for you, you can go right over to my Patreon and subscribe. But if not, I still appreciate you very much, and I thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Bye guys.